A girl is standing in a corridor, holding a katana her dead sister made from the last thing she had left to give. The sister used everything, every unit of what little she was born with, to forge a single blade and sever the last thread connecting them. The girl's body has just become something the world has never had to account for before. And somewhere in the estate above her, the people who decided she was nothing are going about their evening without knowing what is coming down the hall toward them. That is one afternoon in the middle of Jujutsu Kaisen's run, and the show kept writing afternoons exactly like it. Quiet, and then suddenly total, devastating in the specific way of things that have been building for years before anyone sees them arrive. Tonight is a slow walk through the episodes that made this series what it is. Welcome to Anabrain. Let's get started. Section 1. The Boy Who Swallowed a Curse. There is a particular kind of story that begins with a single irreversible decision. Not a grand plan, not a speech, not a moment of destiny announced with dramatic music. Just a quiet, almost ordinary instant where someone does something they cannot undo, and everything that follows, every consequence, every loss, every relationship, every battle across 3 seasons of television traces itself back to that one act. Jujutsu Kaisen begins exactly that way. And what makes it work so well, what gives the whole machine its emotional power before a single curse has been introduced, is the patience the show applies to the world before that decision happened. Yuji Itadori lives in Sendai. He is a high school student. He visits his grandfather at the hospital after school with a regularity that speaks to genuine affection rather than obligation. He runs track with easy, unconsidered joy. He is physically gifted in a way that borders on absurd, able to throw a shot-put ball at speeds that competitive athletes spend careers trying to reach. Strong enough that anyone watching him train immediately senses that something about his body operates outside normal parameters. But the show is careful not to frame this as something Yuji thinks about much. He is not brooding over his ability. He is not waiting for destiny. He exists in that specific, recognizable state of being a teenager who has a good life and knows in some low-key way that he is fortunate. The show takes its time with this version of Yuji because it understands that the weight of everything that comes later depends entirely on knowing this version of him first. What will be taken from him only registers as a loss if we understood what he had. The warmth he brings to every interaction, the ease with which he talks to people, the way he moves through the world without suspicion. These are not just character traits. They are the baseline against which every subsequent episode measures how much damage has been done. His grandfather is dying. The old man has clearly lived a long life shaped by things he chose never to fully explain to his grandson. There is a quality of someone who has seen too much and decided deliberately to spare the person he loves most from carrying any of it before he has to. As he fades, he gives Yuji 2 things. The first is a practical instruction about hospital rules that lands with light humor. The second's quieter, more serious, and more permanent. He tells Yuji that he wants him to die surrounded by people, not alone in some unmarked corner of a conflict no one else witnessed, not forgotten. Not as a casualty whose passing gets absorbed into a larger tragedy without anyone stopping to mark it. He wants his grandson to be with people when the end comes, and to know, in that moment, that the people around him are there by choice. It is a small thing to say aloud, but the show returns to it repeatedly, across multiple seasons and across situations that seem designed specifically to make honoring it impossible. That dying wish becomes the emotional architecture underneath Yuji's entire character. Every choice he makes about who to protect, every refusal to abandon someone even when strategy would suggest otherwise, every moment where he stays in a fight long after the sensible thing would be to run. It all flows from those 2 sentences spoken in a hospital room by an old man who knew he was running out of time. His grandfather dies shortly after. Yuji, grieving and slightly untethered from his normal routine, finds himself pulled into a situation involving a sealed, cursed object that some of his classmates have accidentally disturbed. The object has been sitting in a storage area at their school, and cracking it open has released something. Not a curse yet, but the scent of one, which is enough to begin drawing cursed spirits to the location. Cursed spirits, as the show explains with the methodical patience of a world that takes its own rules seriously, are not supernatural creatures in the traditional sense. They are manifestations. They are born from the negative energy that human beings produce: fear, grief, resentment, despair. And they exist in a layer of the world that ordinary people cannot perceive. Most people walk past cursed spirits their entire lives without ever knowing it. Sorcerers are the ones who can see them, engage them, and exorcise them. And on this particular rooftop in Sendai, with cursed spirits beginning to converge on a sealed object none of the students should have touched, Yuji arrives. He is strong enough to fight physically even against creatures most people cannot see. His body, whatever it is, responds to the physical reality of cursed spirits in a way that most non-sorcerers cannot manage. He holds his own. But holding his own is not the same as solving the problem. And the problem is the finger. Ryomen Sukuna is not simply a powerful figure from the ancient past. In the world Jujutsu Kaisen builds, he occupies a category that almost nothing else shares. Roughly 1,000 years before the events of the show, Sukuna existed as a human sorcerer, a true human being with cursed energy so vast, so overwhelming, so far beyond anything the Jujutsu world had encountered before or since, that the entire community of sorcerers united against him. Every grade, every clan, every available fighter, they killed him. And even death was not enough to erase what he was, because the cursed energy that had animated him was too concentrated to simply dissipate. His body was destroyed, but his curse persisted. It condensed into 20 fingers, each one carrying within it a fragment of everything Sukuna had been, and each one radiating a level of cursed energy that placed them in a category of danger all their own. Sorcerers have spent 1,000 years trying to locate them, contain them, and prevent any single entity from accumulating too many of them in one place. One of those fingers has ended up in a storage room at a high school in Sendai, cracked open by students who did not know what they were looking at. Yuji picks it up. He understands on some level that what he is about to do cannot be undone. He swallows the finger. The show does not celebrate this. There is no swelling score behind it, no triumphant lighting. He does it because the alternative is watching his classmates die on a rooftop, and the dying wish of the grandfather he just lost does not give him a comfortable way to choose otherwise. The act is desperate and human and irreversible, and the show treats it exactly like that. What happens next is disorienting even on rewatch. Sukuna surfaces. He wears Yuji's body with the casual confidence of someone who has never had to adapt to a situation in their life, like a man trying on a coat and finding it an acceptable fit. He surveys the rooftop. He destroys the cursed spirits with almost contemptuous ease, not because he is trying to help, but because their presence is mildly irritating and he has the means to end it. There is a quality to Sukuna in this first appearance that the show maintains across every subsequent one. He is not angry, not villainous in the way that requires effort, not performing menace for an audience. He is simply a being for whom ordinary obstacles do not register as obstacles. The cursed spirits are not a threat to him. They are an inconvenience, and he removes inconveniences. Then Yuji fights his way back. He reclaims his own consciousness from the inside of his own skull, reasserts control of his own body, and the show pauses for a moment to let that land. Because what Yuji just did, wrestling back autonomy from a 1,000-year-old curse that has never met a host it could not dominate, should not be possible. Sukuna, when he resurfaces briefly to assess the situation, seems genuinely curious about it. Not threatened, not impressed exactly, but interested. That flicker of interest from Sukuna will do enormous narrative work across every season that follows. Satoru Gojo arrives. His entrance is, like most of his entrances, calibrated to communicate something specific about the kind of person he is. He is relaxed in a way that reads as either profound confidence or profound indifference, and the show eventually makes clear that it is actually both simultaneously. He surveys the situation, he assesses Yuji, and rather than doing the thing that would be easiest, executing the vessel, sealing the finger again, filing a report, he makes a different argument entirely. The Jutsu establishment operates on a simple principle where Yuji is concerned. A human being carrying Sukuna's curse within them is not a student. They are a container for something dangerous, and the appropriate response to a dangerous container is destruction. The logic is not malicious. It is, from a certain angle, genuinely reasonable. Sukuna in the wrong hands, Sukuna with a vessel capable of allowing him to operate with full freedom, represents a catastrophe-level event. The conservative position is elimination. Gojo counters with something more complicated. If Yuji can actually maintain control, if a host capable of holding Sukuna without being consumed exists, which has apparently never happened before, then that host becomes the single most efficient solution to the problem of 20 scattered fingers. Let Yuji eat them all. Let him accumulate the full power of the King of Curses in a body strong enough to contain it. Then, when all 20 fingers are accounted for, and there is nothing left to collect, execute him cleanly. One death instead of the ongoing catastrophe of those fingers remaining loose in the world. It is a bleak proposal dressed as strategy. The governing council of the Jujutsu world accepts it, partly because Gojo is not a person they can easily refuse, and partly because the arithmetic is genuinely difficult to argue with. And so Yuji Itadori, a 17-year-old who came home from his grandfather's deathbed and swallowed a demon because he could not think of a better option, is enrolled at Tokyo Jujutsu High with a death sentence already written and a purpose attached to it that has nothing to do with his own survival. The show follows him through the early weeks of that enrollment with a texture that rewards close attention. He meets his classmate. Megumi Fushiguro is a second-year student whose whole manner suggests someone who decided some time ago to keep the world at a managed distance and has been fairly successful at. He is not cold exactly, he is contained. He has a philosophical clarity about the work of being a sorcerer that Yuji, arriving fresh from a completely ordinary life, finds both clarifying and slightly unnerving. Nobara Kugisaki arrives from a rural background and immediately establishes herself as someone who has already made peace with exactly who she is and has very little patience for anyone who expects that to change. She is funny and fierce in equal measure, and the show allows her to be both without treating the comedy as a diminishment of her capability. The three of them are assigned the Cursed Wom mission together, not as an action deployment but as what is framed, with the suspicious optimism of bad planning, as an observation exercise. A juvenile detention center has a special grade curse inside it. They will go in, assess the situation, and report back. They will not engage. Gojo will be nearby. The framing dissolves immediately. The curse seals the building from the inside once they enter. The barrier is constructed to keep powerful sorcerers out, which means Gojo, the one person who would resolve this in approximately 40 seconds if he were inside, is standing on the other side of a wall he cannot breach without waiting for it to weaken. The 3 first years are on their own. What follows across those episodes is the show demonstrating, with quiet and relentless clarity, that it is not going to soften consequences to protect characters the audience has come to like. The special grade curse inside that building is not a creature that can be overcome through cleverness alone. It is not the kind of obstacle that yields to a well-timed plan. It is something that exists at a level beyond where first-year students should be operating, and the show does not pretend otherwise. Characters take serious damage. Escape routes that seem viable collapse. The claustrophobia of the sealed building is maintained throughout. There is no wide-open battlefield, no space to breathe or regroup, just corridors and rooms and a creature that is not going anywhere. Yuji moves through it with the same quality he will demonstrate for the rest of the series. He is not tactical in the way that Megumi is. He does not have a plan unfolding in precise sequence. What he has is an inability to stop while there is still something to be done, and a body that absorbs punishment and continues past the point where most people would have nothing left to give. He gets hurt repeatedly. He keeps moving. The grandfather's dying wish sits somewhere underneath every step, not spoken aloud, not performed, just present. The thing that makes stopping feel more impossible than continuing. When Gojo finally breaches the barrier, the relief is genuine. But the show is already doing something more sophisticated than delivering a rescue. Gojo's arrival underlines, by contrast, exactly what the absence of Gojo looks like. He is the exception. He is the person who changes the math of any situation he entered. And the vast majority of what these characters are going to face across 3 seasons will happen in places where Gojo is not present, cannot be reached, or is, as the show will eventually demonstrate in the most devastating way possible, simply unavailable. By the end of these establishing episodes, Jujutsu Kaisen has built something that many long-running shows take far longer to assemble. The world has coherent internal logic that the show applies consistently rather than conveniently. The characters have individual voices that are already distinct enough that you could identify them without name. The tonal register is established clearly. This is a show with warmth and humor and moments of genuine lightness, and it is also a show where the dark things are genuinely dark, not softened by the genre conventions that usually keep main characters comfortable. And at the center of everything is Yuji Itadori, carrying a death sentence he accepted willingly, trying to honor a wish he was given by a man who loved him, in a world that is going to keep making both of those things feel impossible. That is the foundation. Everything built on top of it in this show, every loss, every escalation, every moment that made viewers stop breathing, stands because this foundation holds. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section laid down the world and the boy at the center of it, the choice that could not be undone, and the wish that drives everything forward. What comes next is the episode that removed all doubt about what this show was truly willing to do, and it did it through a character whose name most people did not even know before it decided to break their heart with him. Section 2. The night Junpei died, most television shows, especially animated ones aimed at younger audiences, operate on an unspoken agreement with the people watching them. The agreement is not written anywhere and never discussed aloud, but it is felt immediately and consistently. The main characters will survive. They may be injured. They may suffer. The circumstances around them may deteriorate in ways that feel genuinely threatening. But the people the show has centered, the faces in the opening credits, the ones the audience has spent hours learning to care about, will make it to the end. That agreement shapes how viewers engage with the danger presented to them. It softens edges that would otherwise cut. It creates a specific emotional register, something that feels like tension, but is actually a kind of theater, performed between a show and its audience, where everyone already knows how it ends. Jujutsu Kaisen breaks that agreement in its first season, not at the end. Not in a finale designed to signal a new, darker phase. It breaks it in episode 12, with a character who is not in the opening credits, who has been present for only a handful of episodes, and whose death arrives in a moment so abrupt and so deliberately designed to feel exactly like cruelty that the first-time audience has no framework for processing it. After episode 12, the agreement no longer exists. The show will never fully restore it. To understand why that moment hits as hard as it does, you have to understand who Junpei Yoshino actually is, and the show works hard to make sure you do, across a sequence of episodes that functions almost like a short story, running parallel to the main plot. Junpei is 17 years old when the show introduces him. He attends Satozakura High School. He is the kind of student who falls between the categories institutions prefer, not disruptive enough to be addressed, not compliant enough to be comfortable. He has a visible cluster of circular scars across his forehead, burn marks left by cigarettes pressed there by other students, while the adults responsible for preventing exactly that kind of thing chose to look somewhere else. His homeroom teacher, Sotomura, has watched this happen and made the institutional calculation that involvement creates complications while non-involvement does not. Junpei understands this with the specific, complete clarity of someone who learned it early. He loves film. In his first year, he tried to start a small movie research club with 2 friends, a quiet, private thing, built around something he cared about. The delinquent students led by Ito, the boy who has made Junpei's daily existence a study in targeted cruelty, took the classroom. The friends who started the club with him eventually drifted away, the way people drift away from anything that becomes too associated with someone being visibly hurt. By the time the show reaches him, Junpei spends most of his time alone in theaters, watching films in the dark, in the one place where nobody knows him and nobody has decided anything about him yet. The show takes time with it does not condense Junpei's situation into a few establishing shots and then move past it. It sits with the texture of a life that has been shaped by systematic, low-grade cruelty, the kind that leaves no dramatic single incident to point to, only an accumulation of moments where the world made clear that he was not worth protecting. His belief, which he holds carefully and carries like a theory he has tested against significant evidence, is that indifference is the only honest response to other people, not hatred that requires too much investment. Just a flat, managed distance from everyone and everything, because the alternative is caring about things that will eventually be taken away or turned against you. His mother Nagi is the exception. She is warm and genuinely present in a way that reads as remarkable precisely because nothing else in Junpei's life is. She watches movies with him. She talks to him without the particular weight of someone managing their tolerance for his company. The love between them is quiet and ordinary, and the show frames it carefully because it is going to use it. Mahito finds Junpei at a movie theater. He has already been watching Junpei from a distance, identifying him the way a particular kind of predator identifies a particular kind of vulnerability. The 3 students who have been bullying Junpei are also at the theater that night, seated in front of him, talking through the film, indifferent to his presence, in the way only people who have never had to consider consequences are indifferent. Then Mahito kills them. He does it quickly and without performance, distorting their heads using idle transfiguration and walking out. Junpei follows. Mahito's technique is worth understanding in some detail because it defines everything he does and everything he represents. Idle transfiguration operates on the soul directly. In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, the soul is not metaphysical. It is a real, physical thing that can be perceived and manipulated by someone with the right ability. Mahito can touch the soul of a human being and reshape it, and when the soul changes, the body follows. He can kill instantaneously by simply altering someone's soul in the wrong direction. He can, with more precision, reshape a person's body into something that barely resembles what they used to be, leaving them alive inside the transformation in a state that the show does not shy away from depicting. Most of his victims are shown with awareness still present somewhere behind what their bodies have become, which is one of the show's most consistent sources of genuine horror. He does not use this power casually. He uses it thoughtfully, experimentally, the way a researcher uses equipment, interested in what different inputs produce, curious about the results, never applying anything approaching remorse to the process. He is not performing villainy. He is not enjoying cruelty the way a character who enjoys cruelty performs their enjoyment. He simply does not have the category that would make any of it feel wrong to him. Cursed spirits are born from human negative emotion, and Mahito is specifically born from human hatred of other humans, which means that his existence is, in a direct sense, the physical manifestation of what people do to each other. He looks at Junpei and sees a person shaped by that same hatred, aimed at him by others, and he finds the prospect of being useful to someone in that state genuinely interesting. He takes Junpei into the sewers beneath the city and explains things to him, the nature of cursed energy, the structure of the world that Junpei has been living inside without knowing, the philosophy that Mahito has arrived at through what he frames as careful observation, that souls define humans, that transformation is simply change, that the moral frameworks people use to distinguish acceptable from unacceptable behavior are constructed rather than discovered, and can be discarded by anyone willing to look at them clearly. He does not shout this at Junpei. He offers it gently, as a series of ideas worth considering, from someone who seems to have thought about it more carefully than most people Junpei has encountered. He is doing what manipulators do when they have identified exactly the right wound to press again. Junpei's defenses have been built to resist cruelty. He has spent years becoming harder to hurt through simple aggression. But Mahito does not approach him with aggression. He approaches with patience and apparent respect for Junpei's intelligence, and the part of Junpei that has been waiting for someone to treat his perspective as worth engaging with is not well defended against that. He begins to trust Mahito. Not blindly. There's a scene where Junpei sees Mahito's experiments in the sewer, the grotesquely transformed bodies of people Mahito has reshaped for his own purposes, and his expression goes quiet in a way that suggests he is absorbing something he cannot fully reconcile. But he does not leave. The accumulated weight of a life in which every institution and most individuals have failed him has made the capacity for leaving a difficult one to access. Meanwhile, Yuji has been tracking the situation. He finds Junpei at school and does something that the show presents with specific care. He treats Junpei like a person, not a suspect, not a problem to be solved. He sits with him. They talk about movies. Yuji is constitutionally capable of the managed distance Junpei has constructed as self-protection, and so he simply does not maintain it, and the effect on Junpei is visible. They have dinner together. They watch a film. Yuji meets Nagi, and the warmth of that household, the specific quality of two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company, registers on him. He offers Junpei something he phrases simply: come to Jujutsu High, learn alongside him and Megumi and Nobara, be somewhere that makes sense of the abilities he has developed. It is the right offer. The show signals clearly that Junpei hears it correctly, that something in him is actually considering it, that the version of his life that looks like it could be different might actually be arriving. This is the point at which most shows would follow through on that signal. The character has been rehabilitated by the warmth of the protagonist's worldview. The path forward has been indicated, and what comes next is the work of making it real. Then Nagi dies. Mahito, covering his tracks and simultaneously providing Junpei with a motive that will keep him useful, has placed one of Sukuna's fingers in her house. The cursed energy radiating from it attracts a curse, and the curse kills her. Mahito lets Junpei believe that Shota Ito, the lead bully, the one who pressed cigarettes against Junpei's forehead, is responsible. The grief and the rage that follow collapse everything Junpei had been building with Yuji and replace it with something simpler and much more dangerous. He goes to school. He uses his ability, the Shikigami technique that Mahito's earlier manipulation of his soul gave him access to, against his classmates during the morning assembly. He is not killing them, but the intent is clearly not careful. He confronts Ito. He wants answers. He wants the thing that grief always wants, which is a version of events that makes the loss make sense, that locates the cause somewhere punishable. Yuji arrives. They fight, but the show does not frame the fight as a fight. It frames it as Yuji trying to reach something underneath the rage, trying to find Junpei inside what the grief and Mahito's manipulation have made of him. He finds him. Junpei hears him. Something in the exchange loosens the fixed quality that grief had given everything, and for a moment on that stairwell they are back to where they were at dinner. Two people who might be friends, in a world that might actually have a path through it. Yuji tells him again, come to Jujutsu High, meet everyone. Start from here. Then Mahito appears. He arrives behind them on the stairwell with no announcement and no escalation of tension. Just there, suddenly, in the space between one moment and the next. Yuji immediately registers what he is looking at. He calls out, tells Junpei to run. Junpei, still operating from within the framework Mahito built around him, tries to explain. He begins to say that Mahito is not a bad person, the sentence he has been saying to himself and to others throughout the arc, the conclusion that all of Mahito's careful cultivation of his trust has produced. He begins the sentence and then stops, because something connects. The images of the experiments in the sewer, the dead bullies in the theater, the mother who should still be alive. The sentence dies in his throat, and in the space of that dying he understands, fully and completely and too late, what Mahito actually is. Mahito places his hand on Junpei's shoulder. Idle transfiguration activate. Junpei's body begins to change. Not quickly. The show takes its time with what happens to him, and the animation does not spare the audience from its implications. He becomes something the show frames with complete seriousness, without the distancing comedy that a lesser production might reach for to soften the impact. Yuji is pinned against the wall, physically restrained by Mahito's other hand, watching. He screams for Sukuna. He begs, not demands, not commands, but begs, for the ancient king of curses living inside him to use his ability to reverse the transfiguration, to undo what Mahito has done, to give back the person on the floor in front of him. Sukuna refuses. He and Mahito share a laugh. The two most dangerous entities in this world, one human-born and one curse-born, finding something genuinely amusing in the desperation of a boy on a stairwell who believed, just for a moment, that he could pull someone back from the edge of everything bad that had happened to them. Junpei asks why. One word barely formed, and then he is gone. The show does not cut away from Yuji's face after. It does not rush past the moment toward the next plot development. The grief is given its space, raw and unperformed. The face of someone whose framework for understanding the world has just been broken apart by an encounter with a cruelty so complete that it has no available response. This is what the show has been building toward across multiple episodes, not the action sequence that follows, in which Yuji attacks Mahito with a fury that actually makes the curse bleed first time. Not the discovery that Yuji's unique nature as Sukuna's vessel has given him an involuntary ability to perceive and damage souls directly. What it has been building is this: the first time Yuji Itadori failed to save someone he promised to, and the specific quality of that failure, engineered by something that watched him try with complete detachment and found the trying amusing. the opening sequence of the show actually changes after this episode. In the credits, in the final frame that shows Yuji's face, the expression is different. He is crying. The show adjusted its own opening to reflect what the character has become after this moment, which is a small and precise and completely deliberate gesture toward the understanding that something has been permanently altered. This Yuji is not the one who arrived at Tokyo Jujutsu High. He is the one who learned, on a stairwell in Satozakura, what the world is actually capable of, and what the limits of his own will actually are, and what it means that Sukuna and Mahito laughed at him while Junpei died. The Via's Mahito arc does not present itself as the most spectacular content in the show's run. It has no sequence that rivals the scale of what happens in Shibuya. It has no animation moment that lands in the conversation about the best sequences MAPPA has ever produced. What it has is the most carefully constructed emotional trap in the series, a character built with enough depth that his death registers as a genuine loss, positioned in an arc where the audience has been given every reason to believe the conclusion will be different, and then destroyed in a single moment of manufactured cruelty that the show never apologizes for and never softened. Everything that Yuji carries into the Shibuya Incident, the guilt, the terror, the specific way his resolve hardens around the name Mahito, was put there on that stairwell. The show made sure of it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section showed us the moment Jujutsu Kaisen stopped being the kind of show that keeps its promises, and what that cost Yuji in ways that never fully heal. Next, we reach the moment Satoru Gojo walked onto an open field, combined two opposite forces into something that should not exist, and fired it across the sky. Section 3. Hollow Purple and the field turned to nothing. There is something specific that happens in the middle portion of a long-running animated series, particularly one built around escalating power and conflict, where the show has to make a decision. It has spent its early episodes establishing that the world is dangerous, that the threats are real, and that the people fighting those threats are working close to their limits just to survive. That register of struggle, of cost, of characters operating near the edge of what they can handle is where good storytelling lives. But eventually, almost inevitably, the show has to introduce the ceiling. It has to demonstrate what the absolute upper end of power in this world looks like, not as a threat from the antagonist's side, but as something the audience can stand beside. Something that makes the world feel both larger and more secure simultaneously. Jujutsu Kaisen does this in episode 20, titled Non-Standard, a word that the show uses throughout the series to describe Satoru Gojo, and that, by the time this episode ends, has been given a visual definition precise enough that nobody who watched it will need the concept explained again. What happens in that episode, specifically in the final sequence, when Gojo combines two opposite forces into something that clears a significant portion of a forested area in a single instant, is the show committing to a version of power so far beyond the established scale that it reshapes the audience's understanding of the world they have been watching. To appreciate the weight of that moment, it helps to understand what the Kyoto Goodwill event actually is, and what it is doing for the story before Gojo arrives. The event is an annual competition between Tokyo Jujutsu High and its sister school in Kyoto, a structured exercise in which students from both institutions compete against each other in controlled conditions, observed by their teachers and the administration. The stated purpose is the development of the next generation of sorcerers. The competition gives students experience fighting at a peer level, builds familiarity with different techniques and approaches, and provides the institutions with a calibrated assessment of where their students are. It is on the surface a reasonable and even productive tradition. The reality, by the time this particular iteration of the event begins, is considerably more complicated. The Kyoto principal, Yoshinobu Gakuganji, has already given the Kyoto students a secondary objective that has nothing to do with the competition. Yuji Itadori is to be killed during the event. The circumstances, multiple sorcerers in proximity, a controlled environment with limited oversight, a context in which injury is at least plausible, provide the kind of cover that an assassination requires. Gakuganji's position on Yuji is not irrational from within a certain institutional framework. Yuji is Sukuna's vessel. Sukuna is the most dangerous entity in this world, and the calculus of the Jujutsu establishment leans toward elimination wherever uncertainty is large enough. The students who receive this instruction are not all comfortable with it, and Aoi Todo in particular responds to the arrival of a potential target by doing something entirely unpredictable. He walks up to Yuji and asks him what type of women he is attracted to. This is worth dwelling on for a moment, because the Todo-Yuji relationship is one of the more genuinely strange and charming things the show produces, and it begins here in a way that is both funny and load-bearing. Todo is a prodigious fighter, a third-year Kyoto student with the kind of physical power that makes other sorcerers pay careful attention, and he has organized most of his understanding of people around one question: what does a person love? The answer tells him everything he needs to know about whether they are worth his time. Yuji's answer, tall women with big rear ends, is exactly what Todo himself would have said, and the show plays the resulting moment of recognition completely straight. Todo declares them best friends on the spot, meaning it entirely. and the absurdity of the declaration sits alongside the genuine warmth in it without either canceling the other out. What follows is a fight between them in the forest that functions less as a competition and more as an evaluation. Tado wants to know what Yuji actually is, and Yuji, absorbing punishment and continuing forward, demonstrates enough of an answer that Tado decides the relationship is real. This is happening while the actual competition is supposed to be unfolding. The Kyoto students have mostly moved away from the assassination objective towards something more like a genuine event, complicated by individual reluctance and the practical difficulty of killing someone in front of witnesses. Megumi is elsewhere, fighting his own battle. Nobara is holding her own. The structure of the event is functioning at a surface level, even as the intentions underneath it are in various states of collapse. Then Hanami arrives. Hanami is a special grade cursed spirit, the classification the Jujutsu world reserves for threats that exist beyond what ordinary sorcerers can reasonably address. In terms of raw danger, a special grade curse is an event rather than simply an opponent. Hanami's design communicates this immediately. A tall, plant-integrated humanoid figure with wooden growths across the head and shoulders, and a body that seems to exist partway between flesh and bark. The imagery is deliberate. Hanami was born from the human fear of forests, the deep, atavistic dread that predates civilization, the feeling that natural environments hold threats that human beings are not equipped to process. That fear, accumulated and concentrated into a single entity over a long period, became Hanami. What makes Hanami interesting, beyond the fight itself, is the philosophical position the character holds. The show does not present Hanami as simply destructive. There is an explicit ideological component to the alliance of cursed spirits that Hanami belongs to, one that frames human beings as the source of the world's imbalance, as the creatures whose accumulated negative emotion poisons everything around them and whose continued dominance represents a kind of planetary scale wrongness. Hanami does not hate humans the way a person might hate an enemy. The feeling is closer to how a responsible person might feel about a species that is damaging everything it touches. The curses in this framework are not the monsters, they are the correction. This is not a position the show endorses, but presenting it with enough coherence to be understood is part of how Jujutsu Kaisen distinguishes its antagonists from simple obstacles. Hanami is not in the story to lose to a main character on the way to something more important. Hanami is in the story because the show wants the audience to feel the weight of an ideology that believes its position completely, that has calculated the situation from first principles and arrived at a conclusion that is internally consistent, even if it is also deeply dangerous. The invasion of the Goodwill event is coordinated deliberately. While Hanami moves against the students, Mahito uses the distraction to penetrate the main campus and access the secure storage where Sukuna's fingers and the death painting wands are kept. The entire event is covered. The real operation happens in the margins, while every available sorcerer is occupied with a special grade curse that has no intention of making itself easy to stop. The students respond. Toge Inumaki, who wields a technique based on cursed speech, the ability to impose commands on reality through vocalization, at significant cost to himself, faces Hanami and uses everything he has to slow it down. Megumi fights as well, deploying his Shikigami and working through the situation with the controlled analytical intensity that defines him. The problem, demonstrated clearly and without ambiguity, is that these students are not at a level where they can resolve this. They are buying time. They are holding a door that would otherwise already be open, and the holding is costing them significantly. Yuji and Tado find Hanami together. The sequence that follows is remarkable for several reasons, but the most important of them is what it reveals about Yuji's development since his first days at Tokyo Jujutsu High. He has been training under several of the school's most capable sorcerers. Nanami, who fights with precision and a kind of ruthlessly efficient pragmatism, has been working with him on understanding cursed energy not as a raw force to be pushed outward, but as something that can be channeled with control and intention. The result of that training becomes visible in the battle against Hanami, because Yuji does something in this fight that almost no one does. Black Flash is a phenomenon that happens when a sorcerer times a strike with enough precision that their cursed energy activates within a fraction of a millisecond of the physical impact. When it works, the resulting blast is darker in color than ordinary cursed energy, a consequence of the compressing of space around the point of impact, and the power output increases by roughly 2.5 times the normal value. It cannot be forced. It cannot be planned in advance with certainty. It requires the kind of focused, present attention that most fighters can only achieve in rare moments of perfect alignment between mind and body and circumstance. Landing one Black Flash in a fight is considered exceptional. Landing consecutive Black Flash strikes is the kind of thing that defines career. Yuji lands 4 consecutive Black Flash hits against Hanami in this episode. The show understands what it is communicating with. 4 consecutive Black Flashes on a special grade curse is not simply impressive. It is the show planting a flag about where Yuji's trajectory is pointing. He is not yet the finished article. He does not have the technique depth or the experience that the older sorcerers around him carry. but his ceiling is visible here for the first time in a way it was not before, and it is higher than almost anyone expected. Tudo, watching this, is not surprised in the way that implies he misjudged something. He is satisfied in the way that implies his original assessment was correct, and the evidence is now arriving. Hanami absorbs even this and continues. Special grade curses operate at a level where raw output alone does not end them. The creature uses a technique to draw cursed energy from Yuji and Todo directly, pulling on them from inside the fight, and the situation begins to shift from hard-fought to untenable. Todo switches positions using Boogie Woogie, his technique, which functions by swapping the locations of anything carrying cursed energy at the moment of a clap, works here to prevent Yuji from becoming the one absorbing the draw. The combat management is extraordinary, but Hanami is retreating. The operation is complete, or complete enough, and a special grade curse with functioning intelligence does not stay in a losing position. Then the curtain dissolves. The barrier that the Curse Alliance had built specifically to exclude Gojo Satoru, designed with one purpose, which was to keep the most dangerous sorcerer alive out of this situation for long enough, hits its time limit, 30 minutes. That was all they could reliably maintain it. And at the 30-minute mark, Gojo tears through. He arrives over the battlefield, assesses everything in roughly 3 seconds, and begins moving. He reaches Juzo Kumiya first, the curse user who has been supplementing the attack, and severs his limbs with a precision and speed that communicates clearly that this is not an exertion. It registers as administrative. He tells the Kyoto principal, who is also present and who objects to Juzo's destruction, to get Juzo healed for interrogation. He is managing logistics while incapacitating a special grade threat. He notices that Hanami has begun retreating toward the tree line. The distance is significant. Hanami is moving quickly, using the forest and the terrain as cover, understanding that proximity to Gojo is a position with no survivable outcome, and that the mission parameters have been met. From a tactical standpoint, the retreat is correct. The operation succeeded. There is no reason to stay. Gojo makes a decision. He stretches both arms out. The posture is almost meditative, unhurried, careful. The posture of someone performing something that requires precision rather than force. In his right hand, he gathers cursed technique Lapse Blue, the attractive force of the limitless technique, the positive application of infinity that generates a powerful vacuum by compressing space and pulling everything toward a focal point. In his left hand, he builds curse technique Reversal Red, the reverse, the repulsive force, the divergence of infinity that produces a detonation-like expansion away from a focal point. Red requires a reverse curse technique to generate, meaning it is produced by running positive cursed energy through itself in a loop until the output inverts, which is the kind of process that takes most sorcerers a prohibitive amount of time and concentration to perform even once. Gojo generates both simultaneously, holds them, and then brings them together. What happens when attraction and repulsion converge is not simply a larger explosion. The hollow purple technique produces what the show describes as an imaginary mass, a physical concept from mathematics, an entity that exists at the intersection of things that cannot logically coexist, but do temporarily at the point of collision. The sphere of purple light that results moves forward from Gojo in a straight line at a speed that makes evasion effectively academic, and everything in the path between Gojo and Hanami ceases to exist. The forest, the ground, the terrain that Hanami was using as cover. A significant portion of the landscape simply is not there anymore. The technique does not push things aside or set them on fire or otherwise transform them into something different. It removes them. The visual execution of this moment in episode 20 is worth examining separately from what it means narratively. Mappa makes a specific choice with the color and movement design of Hollow Purple. The two energy, one blue and one red, spiral together in a way that communicates their opposing natures before they merge, and the resulting purple light has a quality that the show will use consistently to indicate this technique whenever it appears in later seasons. The trail left behind where the technique passed through is stark, a clean, wide path of absence through what had been dense forest. Aoi Todo, standing nearby having helped push Hanami into the technique's path, cannot even tell whether it worked or not. The destruction is so total that there is nothing left to evaluate. It works. Hanami survives, technically, a special grade curse with enough endurance to absorb even this, but barely, and only through a desperate emergency retreat. The injuries sustained are severe enough that Hanami's combat effectiveness is significantly compromised from this point forward. Gojo, for his part, celebrates quietly. He confirms the outcome, notes that things are more complicated than they appear, given what Mahito has been doing on the other side of the campus, and begins the process of understanding the full shape of what just happened. The episode ends with the audience knowing two things simultaneously. The first is that Satoru Gojo is exactly as dangerous as the show has been implying. Not in the abstract way of being told that a character is powerful and accepting it on faith, but in the concrete, visual, physically demonstrated way of having seen what happens to a significant portion of a forest when he decides to end a situation. The second is that the people who planned this event were counting on that power being locked outside, and for 30 minutes, it was. The gap between what Gojo represents and what the world looks like in his absence is not theoretical. Episode 20 puts it in exact measurable terms. The gap is the difference between a curtain barrier holding for 30 minutes and a forested area of the Jujutsu High campus existing or not exist. That is not a comforting thing to understand about the world the show is building, but it is an honest one. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section showed us the ceiling, what the world looks like when its most powerful protector decides to stop holding back. Next, we go back in time to the episode where a younger, bleeding, nearly dead version of Gojo rediscovered what he was, and the moment that changed him and everything around him forever. Section 4. Hidden Inventory. Gojo vs. Toji. The Hidden Inventory arc occupies the first 5 episodes of Jujutsu Kaisen's second season, and it does something structurally unusual for the show. It removes the entire established cast of Season 1. Yuji is not present. Nobara is not present. The Kyoto students, the administration, the whole architecture of the world the first season built, all of it steps back. In its place, the show offers 2 characters who exist in Season 1 only as fully formed adults, already settled into who they are, their relationship with each other already a complicated and partially broken thing. Satoru Gojo and Suguru Gato, approximately a decade younger, on a mission that the show knows will end in a way that permanently separates that structural choice, giving the audience a tragedy they already know the ending of, and then making them watch it happen anyway, is one of the more demanding things Jujutsu Kaisen asks of its viewers, and the arc earns the ask. The mission itself is the escort. Riko Amanai, a teenage girl designated as the Star Plasma Vessel, must be brought to Tengen, an immortal sorcerer whose techniques are fundamental to the protective barriers that keep Jujutsu society functioning, but whose evolution without a merger would produce something dangerous and uncontrollable. Riko is the next vessel. The merger will effectively end her individual existence and continue Tengen stabilization. She knows this. The arc spends time with what she does with that knowledge, the way she processes the information that her life has a predetermined endpoint, the way she chooses to live fully in the time she has, while simultaneously being escorted towards something she did not choose. The group tasked with this mission is Gojo and Geto, both second-year students at Tokyo Jujutsu High in this timeline. They are exceptional by any measure the Jujutsu world uses to evaluate sorcerers, and the show is careful to distinguish between exceptional as students and exceptional as the finished article. This version of Gojo is not the Gojo of Season 1. He is powerful, genuinely, significantly powerful by any ordinary standard, but he is operating with an incomplete understanding of his own ability. The 6 eyes work, the limitless technique function, but he has not yet unlocked the full architecture of what the combination of those 2 things makes possible. He is, in a real sense, running at partial capacity without being fully aware that partial capacity is what he is running at. The person who makes this visible is Toji Fushiguro. Toji is introduced to the audience before the audience understands what they are looking at. He appears relaxed, unhurried, almost casual. He is physically imposing, tall and muscular in a way that the show emphasizes without overplaying, and that there is a quality to how he moves through space that reads as someone for whom ordinary caution is a thing other people need rather than something he required. He takes a contract to kill Riko Amanai and neutralize her escorts. The bounty is significant. The parties who want the merger to fail have calculated that eliminating the Star Plasma Vessel is the most reliable way to achieve that outcome, and they have selected Toji because Toji is the person available for situations that cannot be resolved by ordinary means. His background is the kind of story that Jujutsu Kaisen tells better than most long-running series. He was born into the Zenin clan, one of the 3 great Jujutsu family, a bloodline-obsessed institution that measures worth in cursed energy output and ranks its members accordingly. Toji was born with a heavenly restriction. The heavenly restriction is a binding arrangement imposed at the level of existence, a trade that happens before conscious choice is possible, at the level of what a person simply is. In Toji's case, his body made a trade. Every drop of cursed energy that a person would normally carry, every unit of the spiritual force that the Jujutsu world runs on, gone. He has none of it. His cursed energy reading is effectively 0. In exchange, his body became something extraordinary. His physical capabilities exceed every sorcerer of his era in the categories that involve only the body itself: speed, strength, pain tolerance, sensory acuity. He can detect the presence of sorcerers without cursed energy because his physical senses, sharpened to a degree far beyond normal human range, register the phenomenon directly. He can move at speeds that make conventional sorcerer defenses inadequate responses rather than barrier. He can fight continuously, absorb levels of physical punishment that would end most people, and keep coming. The Zenin clan, which had every reason to value what he was if they had been capable of recognizing it, saw only the absence of what they valued most. They rejected him. They marked him as defective. The experience of being raised inside a system that measured his worth by the one thing his body had traded away, and finding that measurement to be the only one that mattered to the people around him, produced something the clan was not equipped to understand. A man with no stake in the world they were trying to protect. He left. He married a woman, took her name Fushiguro rather than carrying Zenin any further, and built a life entirely separate from the Jujutsu world. His wife died. He had a son, Megumi, and afterward, without the thing that had connected him to ordinary life, drifted back toward the only work he was uniquely qualified for: assassination, specifically killing sorcerer. The people who had the power and position and institutional validation that he had been told defined worth, and who he could now dismantle methodically with a body that their training was not designed to address. He sold Megumi to the Zenin clan. Not out of malice toward the boy specifically. The show is careful about this, though it never softens the fact of what he did, but as a transaction with money attached, by a man who had not yet figured out what, if anything, he was still operating in the service of. He does not love his son in a way that translated into staying. He loves him in a way that reveals itself only at the edges, in what he says in the last moments of his life, in what he does when he is resurrected during the Shibuya Incident and realizes, mid-combat, whose name he is hearing. But that is later. At the time of the Hidden Inventory arc, Toji Fushiguro is a contractor, and Riko Amanai is the job. The first encounter between Toji and Gojo ends in a way that Season 2, Episode 3 presents with complete honesty. Toji wins. Not narrowly, not in a way that feels uncertain at any point. He wins decisively. He uses a curse tool called the Inverted Spear of Heaven, which carries a property that makes it particularly dangerous to someone whose defense is built around a continuous spatial technique. Anything it touches nullifies cursed techniques entirely. Gojo's infinity, the passive barrier that wraps around him constantly, the spatial manipulation that makes him functionally untouchable, stops working the moment the inverted spear makes contact. Toji drives it through Gojo's neck. Gojo, by any reasonable measurement, should be dead. He is left in a pool of his own blood, and Toji moves on toward Geto and Riko. Episode 3 of Season 2 carries a 9.7 rating on IMDb, the highest ever recorded for any episode in the show's run at the time of its release, because of what the animation and pacing do with the preceding sequence. This is not a fight rendered in the conventional language of shonen combat. MAPPA uses tight close-ups, specific choices about what the camera shows and withholds, and a texture of movement that makes Toji's physical superiority feel genuinely threatening rather than simply statistically impressive. The episode earned its rating because people who watched it felt what it was doing to Gojo rather than simply observing it, and that distinction between feeling the weight of something and watching it from a safe analytical distance is where animation at this level does its most important work. Toji reaches Geto. Geto fights well and loses. He is kept alive because Toji correctly assesses that killing a sorcerer who carries a large number of contained curses would release them all at once, which creates complications he does not need. He goes to collect the bounty. He carries Riko's body to the waiting members of the Star religious group, the cult that worships Tengen and that, in a sharp irony, is celebrating the death of the vessel their beliefs are built around. Because Riko's death means the merger cannot happen, and Tengen remains accessible in a form they can continue to venerate. They applaud as he walks out. This is where Episode 4 begins its central movement. Toji is leaving. The mission is complete. He moves through the space outside the building with the specific quality of someone whose work is finished and who has already redirected his attention toward whatever comes next, and then he stops. Because Satoru Gojo is standing in front of him. Not dead, not incapacitated, standing. The show takes a moment to let this land on Toji's face before anything else happens, because Toji is not a person who is easily surprised, and what Toji's expression communicates in this beat is that he is encountering something he has not encountered before. He had left Gojo with an injury that should not have allowed recovery. He had verified enough of the outcome to feel confident. And now Gojo is standing in front of him looking, in the show's specific framing, slightly delirious, the expression of someone whose brain is running on something new and enormous, and has not quite calibrated to it yet. Drunk on what he has become, but functional, completely functional. What happened while Toji was gone is the core event of this arc. Gojo, left alone in a pool of his own blood with the six eyes still active and the limitless technique still operating beneath his consciousness even as his body failed, arrived at something through the specific combination of near-death and intellectual desperation. The reverse cursed technique, a process so difficult that most sorcerers cannot manage it, even under ideal conditions, requires running positive cursed energy through itself until the output inverts into something that heals rather than damages. It is the Jujutsu world's equivalent of using a tool against its own function, demanding enough precision that ordinary sorcerers simply cannot do it reliably. Gojo, dying, with his six eyes processing information at a speed no other human nervous system could sustain, figured it out under conditions that should have made figuring out anything impossible. He used it to heal himself completely, and in doing so, in running his cursed energy through the process of reversal with the full observational capacity of the six eyes, he understood for the first time the complete architecture of his own technique. The limitless unfolded for him. Not just blue, which he had been using, not just the passive infinity that surrounded him, But red, the reversal, the repulsion, the detonation, and beyond red, the combination that very few people in the Gojo clan had even known existed. He understood all of it at once, the way a person understands a system when they see it whole rather than in pieces. He is slightly unhinged when he approaches Toji. The show does not soften this. There is a manic quality to his monologue. He is explaining semi-coherently how the reverse curse technique works, as though the information is still spilling out of him faster than he can organize it, as though whatever happened during his recovery is still metabolizing. He tells Toji that Toji has lost. He says this with absolute certainty, and the certainty is not performed confidence. It is the kind of statement a person makes when they have processed the variable and found that the conclusion permits no other interpretation. Toji does not agree, and he does not run. He pulls out the inverted spear of heaven again and begins. The show does a specific thing in this sequence that distinguishes it from the first fight. It lets Toji try. He uses everything he used before. He is faster than most sorcerers can track. He uses the chain weapon at range to account for Gojo's ability to levitate. He recites the properties of the limitless technique from memory. Blue attracts, red repels, purple combines both, because he knows that knowing the technique is the prerequisite for countering it. He has done this calculation once already, using a nullifying weapon to bypass the defense. The problem is that Gojo now has red as well as blue, and Toji does not know about red yet. Gojo fires red for the first time in the show's history. The repulsive force launches Toji backward across a significant distance. He lands without serious injury because he is Toji, because his body is what it is. He gets up, he reassesses, he reviews what just happened. The calculation that worked before no longer works, because the inputs have changed. And Toji is a man who understands that fighting requires accurate information about what you are actually facing, rather than what you expected to face. He calls Gojo a monster. Gojo does not disagree. He is levitating above the space where the fight is happening, and he looks down, and he says something that the show frames as both his character's defining statement and as a reference that carries weight beyond the immediate scene. He says, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one." The line is drawn from a Buddhist tradition, a declaration attributed to the Buddha at the moment of his birth, a proclamation of singular enlightenment. Gojo uses it here not as a religious statement, but as a precise description of what he has understood about himself in the time between being left for dead and standing in front of Toji alive. He is not making a claim he needs to prove. He is reporting a conclusion he has already verified. In the entire world of this story at this moment, he is the only person who is what he is, not the strongest in a comparative sense, simply the only one of his kind. He holds his arms out. He generates blue and red simultaneously. He brings them together into purple for the first time in his life, and the imaginary mass that results fires forward and removes most of Toji's left side. Toji is still standing. This is the show's way of maintaining one last gesture of respect toward what Toji Fushiguro actually is. Even nearly destroyed, he is upright. He thinks, in the space of whatever remains, about the moment during the earlier fight, when he sensed that something was wrong. The thing that was off, he had dismissed it. He understands now what it was, the specific quality of fighting someone who is about to become something entirely different, and whose current form is the last version of themselves they will ever be. He tells Gojo about Megumi, that his son, in a few years, will be sold to the Zenin clan, that Gojo should do whatever he wants with that information. He dies on his feet. The episode does not stop there. It carries the story forward to Gojo and Geto standing together outside the building where Riko's body is, surrounded by the members of the cult who applauded her death, and Gojo asking if they should kill everyone present. Geto's answer, not because there is no point, but because the point is the most important thing, especially for sorcerers, is the last moment before the fracture between them begins to open. The episode places those two sentences in sequence deliberately. Gojo's question contains no malice. It contains a recognition that the world contains things worth removing, and that he now has the ability to remove them. Geto's answer contains the faint outline of a philosophy that is about to be tested beyond its capacity to hold. Season 1 Gojo is the result of what this episode creates. Everything relaxed, everything confident, everything performed with the specific lightness of a man who found his ceiling and discovered it was much higher than he thought. It comes from here, from a pool of blood outside a building in 2006, from the process of healing himself and understanding himself completely in the same moment, from a declaration made in midair to an opponent who recognized what it meant even as it ended him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section took us back to the moment Satoru Gojo became the figure the rest of the series is built around, born out of near death and confirmed by a line spoken to a man who understood exactly what it meant. Next is the day in Shibuya when even the honored one could be removed from the board entirely, and the silence that fell over everything after it. Section 5. Gate open. Gojo sealed. There is a particular kind of dread that builds slowly through the early episodes of the Shibuya Incident arc. Not the dread of immediate danger, which the show delivers openly and without delay, but the quieter and more unsettling dread of watching pieces slide into position. of understanding, before any single character in the story understands it, that something very large and very carefully constructed is approaching completion. The Shibuya Incident arc begins with chaos as its surface texture, and the chaos is real and the casualties are real, and the fights that fill the first several episodes of the arc are genuinely extraordinary. But underneath all of it, beneath every collision and every deployment and every tactical decision the sorcerers make in response to what seems like an escalating attack on a crowded city, there is a mechanism, and the mechanism has one purpose. Everything in Shibuya on the night of October 31st is built to put Satoru Gojo inside a box. The plan begins with a problem so fundamental to the antagonist's goals that it has been the central obstacle for longer than the show has been depicting. Gojo exists. He breathes and moves and occupies the world, and as long as he does, there is no credible path toward the kind of restructuring Kenjaku has spent centuries working toward. This is not hyperbole within the logic of the show. Kenjaku explicitly understands and states that killing the Six Eyes user is not a long-term solution, because the Six Eyes will eventually appear again in another person, and that person will present the same problem. The answer is removal without death, permanent containment, taking Gojo out of the game in a way that cannot regenerate. The prison realm is the instrument of that containment. It is a special-grade cursed object of unusual and disturbing origin, constructed from the remains of a Buddhist monk named Genshin, whose cursed energy was so concentrated at the time of death that it did not disperse but rather crystallized into a physical object with its own ongoing properties. In its inactive form, it is small enough to hold in one hand, resembling a cube wrapped in talisman constraints. When opened, it becomes something else entirely. A living barrier, one that can seal absolutely anything inside an inescapable internal dimension, where time and space operate on different terms than they do in the ordinary world. The condition for sealing is specific. The target must remain within 4 meters of the prison realm for 1 full minute after the gate opens. 1 minute of sustained proximity. For almost anyone else who has ever lived, this would present no serious challenge. Open the box, wait 60 seconds, done. For Gojo, who perceives the flow of cursed energy through the Six Eyes at a resolution so precise that he reads the world at an atomic level, who moves at speeds that make 60 seconds an eternity of available responses, 1 minute of sustained proximity is not achievable through direct means. Kenjaku knows this. It is why the Shibuya Incident is not simply an attempt to corner Gojo physically. It is a psychological operation conducted through the language of bodies and chaos and civilian suffering, designed to occupy every one of Gojo's resources simultaneously, until the one resource that cannot be replaced runs out. The beginning of the episode that contains the sealing shows Gojo already in combat. The show opens with a montage of different characters describing what Gojo means to them, each answer landing differently depending on the relationship and the tone. Yuji states simply that Gojo saved his life. Megumi says something similar. The Kyoto students are characteristically uncharitable, but ultimately unable to deny the baseline reality that Gojo is the singular force around which the safety of everything else is organized. The montage is brief and lands with the specific weight of the show asking the audience to hold something in their hands before taking it away. In the underground levels of Shibuya Station, Gojo is fighting Jogo, Hanami, and Choso simultaneously. He removes his blindfold. This is the visual shorthand the show uses consistently to indicate that Gojo is past the threshold of treating something as a warm-up exercise. Without the blindfold, the Six Eyes operate without the dampening that keeps the flood of perceptual information manageable in ordinary circumstances. He sees everything. He processes everything. He targets Hanami with the specific tactical intelligence of someone who has already calculated the order in which things need to happen and is simply executing. What follows is not a fight in any conventional sense. Jogo throws civilians at him, and they hit Gojo's infinity and hang there absurdly, suspended in the spatial manipulation that makes him effectively untouchable. Hanami and Choso engage from multiple angles. Gojo is fighting all of them at once, managing civilians as a secondary concern throughout, and treating the entire situation with a quality of focused attention that communicates genuine engagement rather than detachment. He is not bored. He is present and sharp and completely in control. He uses his domain expansion. The unlimited void opens for 0.2 seconds. The rationale is precisely calculated. His domain, when maintained, floods everyone inside it with infinite simultaneous stimuli, overloading the nervous system and leaving targets paralyzed. The question is whether non-sorcerers who are caught inside a domain expansion for less than a fraction of a second will sustain damage or simply be briefly overwhelmed and recover. Gojo has done the mathematics and decided the risk is acceptable. He opens it for 0.2 seconds, paralyzes every cursed entity in range, and uses the window to begin systematically eliminating the transfigured humans that Mahito has sent in to fill the space. Over the course of roughly 5 minutes, he kills over 1,000 transfigured humans. He does this while managing 3 special grade opponents and maintaining awareness of every civilian in the immediate area. Jogo eventually runs, not because he is defeated, but because the plan requires him to create distance and buy time rather than win outright. and winning outright has become obviously impossible. Gojo pursues at his own pace, not urgently but deliberately, the way a person follows up on something that has not been fully resolved yet, and then the prison realm opens on the floor behind him. The show handles this moment with specific attention to what happens to Gojo's perception first. The six eyes register it. The eye inside the prison realm makes contact with Gojo's gaze, and the mechanism begins. The gate is open. The 60-second clock is running. Gojo realizes immediately what the object is and understands what is happening, and the response is immediate flight. He moves to exit the 4-meter radius. He is fast enough to do this. Under ordinary circumstances, from this position against this particular condition, he could simply leave. Then a voice says, "Hey Satoru," the voice is Suguru Geto's. The cadence is correct. The specific quality of familiarity in it is correct. The name used, the casual informality of it, everything about how the voice sounds lands in the exact register that belongs to the one person in the world Gojo has known since they were teenagers together. The one person whose loss reshaped him in ways the show has been tracing since Season 2 began. Gojo killed Geto himself at the conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, a choice the show does not depict directly, but whose weight it carries throughout the hidden inventory arc and into this one. He killed his best friend with his own hands. That death is not something Gojo has resolved. It is something he carries. He freezes, not for long, half a second, perhaps less. But the six eyes see the world at a resolution, where half a second is a measurable period of time with real consequences attached to it, and the freezing means that Gojo, for the first time in the sequence, is within 4 meters of the prison realm and not actively moving away from it. The person wearing Suguru Geto's face is not Suguru Geto. The show confirms this with characteristic efficiency. The body pulls back the stitches on its forehead to reveal what is underneath. The entity calling itself Kenjaku, an ancient curse user who has been transplanting their brain into successive human hosts across centuries, took over Geto's corpse after his death in 2017. Kenjaku used Geto's curse technique, the ability to absorb and deploy cursed spirits, as the primary organizational mechanism for the entire Shibuya operation. The appearance of the person Gojo loved most, deployed at the precise moment the clock needed those particular seconds, is not coincidence and is not improvisation. It is the core mechanism. The entire elaborate construction of the Shibuya Incident, the months of planning, the coordination of multiple special-grade cursed spirits and human collaborators, the careful management of every variable, was built around one psychological certainty, that hearing Geto's voice would cost Gojo something. Gojo speaks before the ceiling completes. He addresses the body directly, asking the real Geto how long he is going to allow himself to be used this way. The show does something remarkable here that it does not comment on or explain. Geto's body begins to choke itself, not because Kenjaku commands it. Kenjaku does not command it. The body acts independently. The grip at its own throat, a reflex that suggests something inside it, still responds to Gojo's presence in a way that Kenjaku cannot fully control. Whether this represents a fragment of Geto that persists somewhere in the physical matter, or whether it is something else entirely, the show leaves deliberately unresolved. It lands as the saddest detail in the sequence. The prison realm closes. Gojo is sealed. The silence that follows in the show's pacing is not dramatic silence, the kind that holds space for a reaction. It is operational silence. The cursed spirits regroup. Kenjaku secures the prison realm and begins the next phase of operation. The Jujutsu establishment, receiving word through communication channels that Gojo has been sealed, begins its own process of absorbing something that has no precedent in living memory. The strongest sorcerer alive has been removed from the board. Everything that was organized around his continued presence must now reorganize around his absence. Yuji receives the information through an earpiece. He processes it with the specific quality of someone who has just had the foundational assumption of their entire understanding of the situation revised without warning. Gojo was not an obstacle anyone was seriously planning to live without. He was the constant. He was the thing that made the mathematics of the sorcerer world function. What comes after Gojo is sealed is not a continuation of the same situation at a lower power level. It is a fundamentally different situation, with different stakes, different possibilities, and a different distribution of who can do what to whom. What makes this episode devastating beyond the immediate event is the elegance of what Kenjaku understood and used. He did not find a weakness in Gojo's technique. He did not locate an error in Gojo's processing or a gap in his spatial awareness. He found the one human thing that Gojo had never been able to fully contain, the grief that the show has been tracking quietly through the entire hidden inventory arc, and he put it on the floor in front of Gojo at the moment it would cost the most. Half a second. That is the entire margin by which the strongest sorcerer in the world was removed from it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section showed us the night the unthinkable became real and the world of Jujutsu Kaisen lost its greatest shield. Next, with Gojo gone, Sukuna found an opening. Megumi found himself at the edge of death, and something ancient and terrible woke up inside Shibuya Station and decided to redecorate. Section 6, Thunderclap. Sukuna Unleashed in Shibuya. The Shibuya Incident arc moves through its middle section with the specific logic of an avalanche. Each piece that falls sets the next piece in motion, and by the time any individual element finishes, something worse has already begun. The sealing of Gojo at the end of Season 2, Episode 9 is the stone at the top of the mountain. What follows across the subsequent episodes is the accumulation of everything that stone displaces on its way down. Characters are injured, characters are killed, strategic positions that felt stable an episode ago cease to exist. The Jujutsu establishment, which functioned on the foundational assumption that Gojo was operational and accessible, begins coming apart at the structural level. By episode 17, titled Thunderclap Part 2, the arc has already accumulated more consequences than most shows produce in an entire season. This is the episode where Sukuna, freed from any pretense of restraint, dismantles a significant portion of Shibuya with what amounts to casual thoroughness. It is not the most emotionally devastating episode in the arc. That distinction belongs to other moments still ahead. But in terms of raw scale, in terms of the show demonstrating how much destruction is available at the upper end of what the world of Jujutsu Kaisen contains, episode 17 is the sequence that defines the ceiling. The chain of events that leads to it begins with Megumi Fushiguro making a decision in a corridor somewhere in Shibuya, bleeding and already operating past the point where most sorcerers would have nothing left to give. He has been fighting continuously. The earlier battle involving Toji, resurrected through a seance technique and operating without memory or reasoning, left him badly damaged in ways that are not immediately apparent to the people around him. He moves through the arc in this compromised state, doing what Megumi does under pressure, which is to keep calculating and keep moving and keep making the next decision regardless of what his body is communicating. Haruta Shigemo finds him. Shigemo is a curse user who has survived the Shibuya incident thus far through a combination of a specific luck-based technique and the willingness to target people who are already seriously injured. He is not a powerful antagonist in absolute terms, but he is exactly the right kind of threat for someone in Megumi's condition, because Megumi does not currently have the resources to address him through conventional means. He cannot fight his way out, he cannot run. The options available to him reduce, through the logic of his injuries and the space he is in and the presence of Shigemo, to 1. Megumi summons Maharaga. The 8-hand sword divergent Sila Divine General Maharagaya is within the taxonomy of the 10 Shadows technique, the final and unreachable Shikigami. Every user of the 10 Shadows technique begins the same way, bonding with a pair of divine dogs at a young age and expanding their Shikigami catalog from there through a process of ritual taming. Each Shikigami requires subjugation in a one-on-one trial before it can be controlled. Maharaga has never been tamed. In the entire history of the 10 Shadows technique, across every sorcerer who has ever possessed the ability, not one has managed to bring Maharaga under their control. The ritual for summoning Maharaga is also an exorcism ritual, which means summoning it and taming it are the same act, and failing to tame it means both the summoner and whatever target is caught within the ritual are fighting for their lives against something that has never lost. Megumi summons it while unconscious. He cannot fight it himself. The summoning traps Shigemo within the ritual parameters, which means Shigemo is now in an exorcism ritual with an entity that no one has ever survived taming. For a brief window, this appears to be a final act rather than a solution, and the show frames it as such. Then Sukuna arrives. He has just finished with Jogo, which deserves a mention because the fight with Jogo is its own extraordinary sequence. Jogo is a special grade disaster curse with the ability to generate volcanic temperature, a technique that makes him lethal to almost any sorcerer alive. Against Sukuna, he is not lethal. Against Sukuna, Jogo's fire is something to be used against him, and the sequence ends with Sukuna landing a flaming arrow technique borrowed from Jogo's own cursed energy output that incinerates the curse. Jogo dies believing in the ideology he shared with Hanami, believing that the cursed spirits he fought alongside will eventually inherit the world. Sukuna lets him keep the belief because it costs nothing. He arrives at the location of Megumi's exorcism ritual and understands the situation in approximately 1 second. Megumi is unconscious, Maharaga is present. Shigemo is also present, and Maharaga is about to destroy Shigemo, which would end the ritual, which would kill Megumi. Sukuna intervenes. He saves Shigemo with the specific timing of someone doing precise arithmetic rather than heroism. Shigemo alive means the ritual continues. The ritual continuing means Megumi survives the summoning. Megumi surviving is what Sukuna wants, for reasons the show does not yet fully explain but makes clear are deeply self-interested and long-reaching. He has plans for Megumi Fushiguro that go beyond anything happening in Shibuya tonight. Now Sukuna is in an exorcism ritual with Maharaga. The battle that follows is the reason episode 17 occupies the place it does in conversations about the arc. Maharaga is not a creature that can be beaten through raw output alone, and this is important because raw output is how Sukuna solves almost everything. Maharaga carries an ability called the Wheel of Moho, which allows it to adapt to any phenomenon it encounters. The first time it faces a technique, it may not have a response. By the second or third exposure, it has adapted at a fundamental level, changing its physical and cursed properties to neutralize what was previously damaging. Against an opponent who relies on a finite set of techniques, this makes Mahoraga functionally unbeatable over the course of a long fight. The longer it survives, the more invulnerable it becomes to everything thrown at it. Sukuna's dismantle technique, which sends invisible slashing attacks outward from his body in any direction, connects with Mahoraga once and produces significant damage. Mahoraga responds. The wheel of Myoho turns. The next exchange, the same attack that cut Mahoraga deeply no longer cuts the same way. Sukuna observes this, processes it, and begins calculating the solution to a problem that has defeated every 10 Shadows user who ever lived. The solution is not to find an attack that Mahoraga cannot adapt to. It is to kill Mahoraga faster than it can complete the adaptation cycle. And the way Sukuna does this is by expanding his domain. Malevolent Shrine is Sukuna's domain expansion, and it is structurally unlike every other domain expansion shown in the series. Most domain expansions create a bounded environment, a specific internal space where the user's technique becomes absolute. The barrier is part of the mechanism. Malevolent Shrine has no barrier. It is a domain expansion that functions in the open world without enclosing anything, which means its effective radius, rather than being limited by a constructed interior space, extends outward from Sukuna in every direction up to approximately 140 meters. Within that radius, Cleave and Dismantle activate simultaneously against every target simultaneously. There is no inside to escape to. There is no outside that is safe. Sukuna configures the domain with deliberate precision during its activation, specifically calibrating it to exclude the area where Megumi's body lies. The technical sophistication of this exclusion, the ability to apply a domain expansion with enough granular control to preserve one specific target within its otherwise total effect, communicates something about the gap between Sukuna and every other entity the show has presented as dangerous. He is not simply more powerful. He is more capable in a different sense, operating at a level of cursed energy control where destroying a district while carefully preserving one unconscious teenager in it is a manageable calibration problem. Within 140 meters of Shibuya Station, buildings are cut, the ground is cut, people are cut. 61,000 square meters of urban space receive simultaneous invisible slashing attacks from every direction at once. Mahoraga, caught within the domain, takes relentless dismantle strikes faster than the adaptation cycle can complete. The wheel of Myoho turns. Sukuna hits it again before the turn finishes. He hits it again. The adaptation that makes Mahoraga effectively unkillable in prolonged combat becomes irrelevant because the prolonged combat never has a chance to develop. Sukuna fires the same flaming arrow technique he used against Jogo and destroys what remains. The ritual ends, Megumi is alive, Shibuya is not intact. The show does not cut away from what the domain expansion did to the surrounding area. The aftermath is shown with a specificity that refuses comfort. Buildings with their facades removed. Structures that are partially standing because the geometry of the slash happened to leave portions of their frames in place. A city district that, an hour ago, was filled with the ordinary activity of an October night and is now somewhere between an architectural sketch and a demolition site, cut through at angles that correspond precisely to the reach of Malevolent Shrine. Sukuna returns control of Yuji's body to Yuji. He does this with something that functions as performance. He tells Yuji to look around, to take a good look at what happened here while Yuji was absent from his own body, in the corridor between consciousness and whatever suspended state Sukuna uses when he occupies the front. The show is careful about what Yuji sees and how it registers on his face. He is not simply overwhelmed. He goes through a sequence of recognition that the show takes its time with, each new element of the destruction adding another layer to an understanding that is being assembled in real time. Sukuna killed people, thousands of people, while wearing his body. While Yuji was inside, somewhere unable to intervene, unable to refuse, unable to do the one thing his grandfather's dying wish organized his entire existence around. He gets to his knees. He cried. The show gives this moment the full weight it has earned across 2 full seasons of building a character whose central purpose is preserving life, and then placing him in scene in situations where that purpose becomes harder and harder to honor. The opening song plays over the breakdown. This is a real, documented, creative decision by MAPPA that prompted a significant response from the audience, because an upbeat opening theme over one of Yuji's most devastating moments creates a tonal dissonance that most viewers found jarring rather than deliberate. The consensus is that this particular choice undermined something the animation had otherwise handled with care. The breakdown is real and earned regardless of the music placed over it. What the episode establishes beyond the spectacle of the destruction itself is a new standard for the arc. Shibuya is not recovering from what happened tonight. The damage is not the kind that gets cleaned up and restored while the story moves forward. What Sukuna did in those few minutes will be visible in the world for the rest of the series, a permanent feature of the landscape of consequences that the Shibuya Incident produces. And somewhere inside all of that, Yuji Itadori is on his knees in the rubble of a city district, holding the weight of thousands of deaths he did not choose and could not prevent, trying to understand how to keep moving forward as the person his grandfather wanted him to be. The answer, when he finds it, will not be the same answer he would have given before tonight. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section showed us what Sukuna does when nobody can stop him, and what it costs Yuji to wake up and see it. Next, the destruction of Shibuya gets measured not in buildings but in one specific person, and the corridor, and the beach he kept imagining on the way there. Section 7. Nanami's Last Walk Jujutsu Kaisen is a show that understands the difference between a death and a loss. A death is an event. It happens in a moment, it occupies a scene, it produces a reaction, and then the plot moves forward. Most long-running action series handle their character deaths this way, as punctuation marks in a sequence of events, designed to signal stakes without necessarily asking the audience to stay inside the grief of them. A loss is something slower. It is built over time, across episodes and seasons, through the accumulation of small moments that make a person feel real before the world takes them away. When a loss finally arrives, it does not land as a plot development. It lands as the specific, recognizable feeling of something being gone from a world you had come to rely on. Kento Nanami's death in Season 2, Episode 18 is a loss in this sense, not a death, a loss. And the episode understands the distinction completely. To understand why it works the way it does, it helps to understand who Nanami actually is before the episode begins asking you to watch him disappear. He is a Grade 1 sorcerer, one of the highest functional ranks in the Jujutsu world, possessing a technique called the ratio technique that divides any target into 10 parts and creates an unavoidable weak point at the 7-3 position. No amount of defensive cursed energy concentration changes where the weak point falls. He strikes it with a blunt cloth-wrapped blade and delivers critical hits to anything he engages, regardless of its conventional defensive preparation. The technique is not flashy. It does not produce spectacular visual effects. It is precise and methodical, and entirely representative of how Nanami approaches everything. He was a student at Tokyo Jujutsu High in the same period that Gojo and Geto attended as older students. His only real classmate was Yu Haibara, whose personality was almost exactly his inverse, where Nanami was quiet and reserved and inclined toward a careful, managed relationship with optimism. Haibara was genuinely and persistently positive in a way that the world of Jujutsu sorcery did not particularly reward. They balanced each other. Nanami's negativity was offset by Haibara's steadiness, and in return, Haibara had next to him someone who would not pretend that the difficult things were not difficult. The friendship was real. Haibara died on a mission in their second year, a mission that was more dangerous than the two of them were prepared, issued by an administration that understood the probability outcomes and sent them anyway, because the Jujutsu establishment has always operated with an unsentimental relationship to the expenditure of human life. Nanami stood in the morgue afterward and absorbed what the machinery of his world had produced, and found that he did not have the framework to accept it as a cost of doing business. He graduated and left. He spent 4 years as a corporate salaryman, and the show's depiction of this period, glimpsed through brief flashbacks and references, is both funny and quietly devastating. The corporate world is not brutal in the way the Jujutsu world is brutal, but it is meaningless in a way the Jujutsu world is not, and Nanami is not a person who can sustain meaningless. He works. He wears the suit. He does the job with the same methodical competence he brings to everything, and he is quietly miserable in the specific way of someone who has found that running away from one form of suffering has delivered them to another. The thing that brings him back is a bakery work. He exercises a low-grade curse that had attached itself to her shoulder, a small and technically uncomplicated act, and she cries with gratitude that is completely genuine and completely disproportionate to what Nanami considers to have been a minor effort. The show frames this moment carefully. It is not dramatic. It is simply the experience of doing something meaningful for a specific person and having that person respond with real feeling. And it reminds Nanami of something the corporate world never offered him, the knowledge that what he did actually mattered to someone in front of him. He returns to the Jujutsu world. He is assigned to Yuji Itadori as a mentor, partly because Gojo is unavailable for that particular stretch of Season 1, and partly because the school understands that Yuji needs something Gojo is not constitutionally capable of providing, which is a steady adult presence that takes his situation seriously without using it as an opportunity for performance. What Nanami gives Yuji is difficult to articulate in terms the Jujutsu world usually uses. It is not technique instruction, though he provides that too. It is not protection, though he offers that as well. It is the specific quality of someone who has thought carefully about what this life costs and decided, with full awareness, to do it anyway, being consistently honest with a young person about the difficulty of the path they are both on. He does not comfort Yuji with false optimism. He does not tell him that it will be fine. He tells him the truth at whatever level of truth is useful in the moment, and this consistency between what Nanami says and what he actually believes is one of the rarest things the show offers. Yuji recognizes it. The relationship between them is not warm in a demonstrative way. Nanami does not hug people or deliver speeches about how much he cares, but across the episodes they share, a genuine attachment accumulates, built out of small moments of professional honesty and the particular trust that develops between two people when neither of them pretends that hard things are easy. By the time episode 18 arrives, Nanami has already endured more than the episode before it made visible. The Shibuya Incident has pushed every sorcerer in the field beyond reasonable limits, and Nanami entered those limits carrying the specific weight of someone who never fully stopped measuring the Jujutsu world's relationship with expenditure against the memory of what happened to Haibara. He has fought through the night. He has managed his team through situations that eroded one resource after another, and then Jogo found him and burned the left half of his body, including the entire left side of his face, in a direct attack that should have ended anyone. It did not end Nanami. He keeps walking. The corridor sequence is built on a very specific directorial choice, which is to give Nanami's mental state the same visual access the audience has to the physical space he is moving through. He is walking down a corridor inside Shibuya Station, badly burned, moving at a pace that tells the full story of how much effort each step requires. The show cuts between the physical corridor and the beach. Not melodramatically, not with swelling music designed to cue the emotional response in advance. Just present the corridor and then present the beach, and allow the contrast to do its work. The beach is in Malaysia, Kuantan specifically. He says so aloud, in the quiet internal voice of someone making a decision they have been postponing for a long time. He wants to build a house on an empty beach there. He wants to read the books he has been buying and not opening for years. He is tired. Not in the way a person is tired at the end of a long day, but in the way a person is tired when they have been carrying something for a very long time and are approaching the moment when the carrying must stop. A fan traveled to Kuantan, Malaysia after this episode aired and built a small shrine on the beach. This is the kind of real-world response that only happens when a fictional person has become someone an audience genuinely grieve. He passes a photo booth in the corridor. Mahito is inside it. He does not know this yet. The show knows it. The camera knows. The audience, if they have been paying attention to where Mahito has been operating in the arc, knows it. The moment stretches slightly. The way moments stretch when the thing about to happen is something that cannot be taken back. Mahito steps out. The two face each other. Mahito asks Nanami for his last words, and the show does not sanitize this into something the audience can feel good about. Mahito is not performing menace. He is simply stating an assessment of the situations with the same casual relationship to human life he has maintained throughout the entire series. Nanami has sustained critical injuries from multiple previous engagements. He has no meaningful combat capacity remaining. These are the facts, and Mahito presents them as facts. Nanami thinks about Haibara. The show creates, in the anime version of this moment, a specific addition that was not in the original manga. Instead of Haibara's image appearing where Mahito is standing, which is what the manga did, the anime places Haibara's image off to one side, pointing. Nanami turns. He sees Yuji, who has just arrived at the corridor's edge. The choice matters. In the manga version, the image of Haibara overlapping with Mahito creates a reading that is disorienting and slightly surreal, a final conflation of the person who died first and the entity about to kill him now. In the anime version, Haibara is pointing Nanami toward the future, toward the young sorcerer standing at the corridor entrance who is going to need to carry what Nanami is about to put down. The adjustment makes the gesture that follows legible in a way the manga version did not require, because the manga had different space to work in. Nanami looks at Yuji. He smiles. He says, "You've got it from here." That is all he says. He does not explain what he means. He does not deliver a final lesson or a summary of what he hoped Yuji would learn or a statement about the value of what they shared. He passes the weight from himself to Yuji in 5 words and a smile, the way a person passes something to someone they trust. Then Mahito uses idle transfiguration and destroys the upper half of Nanami's body. Yuji watches this happen. The show does not cut away. He watches it happen, and the episode holds on his face for exactly as long as it needs to, which is long enough to understand that the person looking out from behind his eyes in this moment is not quite the same person who entered the corridor. The reason this death lands the way it does is not the death itself. Deaths in Jujutsu Kaisen are a pattern by this point in the arc. The reason it lands is the beach, the house on the empty beach in Kuantan, the unread books, the exhaustion that Nanami finally allowed himself to acknowledge in the corridor, in the moment before the show removed the possibility of it ever being resolved. He was not pretending to be fine. He was genuinely, quietly, almost peacefully preparing for something different, and the show waited until that preparation was visible before taking it away. That is the specific cruelty that the Shibuya Incident arc deploys over and over, not sudden violence, accumulated cost. It finds the thing each character was walking toward and removes it precisely when they had allowed themselves to believe they might actually reach it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section gave us the quietest death in the arc, built on a lifetime of careful choices and one beach that Nanami never reached. Next, the show collapses what remains of Yuji's capacity to function through 2 more losses in rapid succession, and then asks him to keep fighting anyway. Section 8. The episode that broke Yuji, the Shibuya Incident arc, operates through accumulation. This is the fundamental principle of how it inflicts damage, and it is a strategy that Mahito understands better than any other antagonist in the show, because it is the strategy he has been applying to Yuji Itadori, specifically since Season 1. He knows, with the specific intelligence of a creature born from human emotion, that the fastest way to destroy a person is not through a single overwhelming blow. It is through patience, through the careful layering of loss upon loss until the architecture that holds a person together collapses from within. By the time episodes 18, 19, and 20 arrive in sequence, the accumulation has been extraordinary. Yuji has watched Sukuna level a district of the city using his body as the instrument. He watched Nanami die in a corridor with a smile on his face and 5 words on his lips. He has lost to Choso in direct combat. He has felt Gojo's absence like a structural failure in the floor beneath him. Each of these things individually would be a significant blow to carry forward. Together, compressed into a single night, they represent the methodical dismantling of every resource Yuji Itadori uses to keep moving. Mahito knows exactly what he has been doing. The show makes this explicit. Mahito is not simply fighting Yuji. He has been engineering a specific psychological condition, staging each loss in sequence with the awareness that Yuji's strength does not come from power alone, but from the belief that the effort of protecting people matters. Remove enough of the people being protected. Remove enough of the people doing the protecting alongside him, and eventually the belief itself becomes unsustainable. The sequence that runs across these episodes begins with Mahito splitting himself. The double is not simply a combat trick, though it functions as one. It is a mechanism for being in 2 places at once while fighting 2 people, which serves Mahito's tactical purposes but also guarantees a particular structural outcome. Yuji is fighting one Mahito underground. Nobara Kugisaki is fighting the other above ground across the Dogonzaka district of Shibuya. Nobara has figured out the double. She has deduced through the specific behavior of the Mahito she is fighting, particularly the fact that he has been avoiding using his full technique against her despite having opportunities, that she is not fighting the original. The double can reshape his own body, but cannot apply idle transfiguration to another person's soul. This is the gap she has identified, and she fights around it with characteristic intelligence. She is not simply surviving the encounter. She is managing it, looking for an angle that connects her technique to something useful. Her technique, the straw doll method, uses nails driven through a straw effigy to transmit damage to a target sharing cursed energy with the effigy's focus. Against a Mahito double that shares cursed energy with the original, this creates a genuine offensive avenue. Anything she lands against the double echoes back to the original body, feeding into Yuji's fight and creating damage that Mahito cannot simply absorb and discard. This is the show acknowledging, in the geometry of the combat, that Nobara Kugisaki is not a supporting character in the way the term is sometimes understood. She is a fighter of genuine capability operating inside a plan that the show respects. Then the original and the double cross paths at a junction underground and make the switch. Yuji sees it happen a half second before it matters. He understands what the switch means, and he moves to do something about it, but the geometry does not cooperate. Nobara is coming around a corner, following what she believes is still the double, and she arrives at the junction a beat too late to process what has changed. The original Mahito, now in front of her rather than behind her, raises his hand and makes contact with the left side of her face. The transfiguration begins. The show's handling of the moment between the touch and the visible consequence is careful and deliberate in a way that communicates respect for what is about to happen. Rather than cutting immediately to the injury, it gives the audience a few seconds inside Nobara's perspective. What her mind does in those seconds is go backward through her life, which is what the show does for characters at this point. The flashback sequence in episode 19 runs longer than a simple memory montage. It builds out context for Nobara that the show had not previously provided in this depth, showing the village she grew up in, the specific quality of her childhood there, and a girl named Fumi, who was her closest friend before she left for Tokyo. Fumi matters because Nobara's relationship with people has always been the emotionally honest center of who she is, beneath the confidence and the directness and the total refusal to perform vulnerability in ways other people expect from her. She grew up in a small village where social dynamics were narrow and invasive, where people's business became everyone's business, and where Nobara decided early that indifference was a more sustainable position than caring too openly. She built walls with deliberate intelligence. She kept people at a measured distance, not because she did not want connection, but because she had assessed the available options and found that the ones offering genuine connection came with costs she was not yet willing to pay. Then she arrived at Jujutsu High and found people who were, in her own words, crazy. And gradually, without making a production of it, the walls adjusted. Megumi and Yuji found their way to something real with her, built out of shared experience and the specific texture of people who have been through genuinely difficult things together. Gojo, in his particular and occasionally exhausting way, mattered to her. Nanami mattered to her. The chairs in her heart, which she had kept empty as a defense mechanism, began filling without her explicitly authorizing, and by the time she is lying on the floor of Shibuya Station, she understands that she did not choose this poorly. She looks at Yuji. The transfiguration is working on the left side of her face, and she can feel it and she knows what it means. She says, "Tell everyone it wasn't so bad." In some translations, this becomes the more direct acknowledgement that she lived a good life, and both versions are accurate to the same underlying meaning. She is not saying this to be brave. She is saying it because it is what she has just understood in the flashback, and she wants to make sure Yuji hears it before she can no longer say anything. The left side of her face transfixes. She collapses. Yuji's spirit breaks. The show is specific about this. It is not that he becomes angry or that his fighting intensifies in response to grief. What happens is closer to a structural failure than an emotional response. The accumulation of everything the night has produced, landing finally on the body of the person who is, alongside Megumi, the center of the small world he has been protecting in the middle of the larger one, removes the last component holding the architecture together. He is not functioning. He is on the ground, barely managing to call her name, with Mahito looking down at him with the specific calm of someone who has completed a calculation and confirmed the result. Mahito hits him with Black Flash. The Black Flash from Mahito is different from the ones Yuji has been landing throughout the arc. When Yuji uses Black Flash, it is the expression of a specific alignment between focused intent and physical timing, the sorcerer at their highest level of present attention. When Mahito uses it here, the show frames it as something almost contemptuous. He is landing technique that belongs to moments of peak concentration against someone who has lost the capacity to concentrate. He is hitting a person who has been already emptied, and the darkness of the compressed space around the impact point communicates the precise quality of what Mahito represents in this moment. Not a worthy opponent meeting Yuji at the highest level, but a predator applying pressure to someone who cannot currently respond. What saves Yuji is Aoi Todo. His arrival is one of the moments the arc earns through the relationship it has been building. Todo appears not with a dramatic speech or a scene of self-introduction, but simply by being there, the way genuine friends show up rather than arriving. He claps. Boogie Woogie activates. The geometry of the fight reorganized, and before Yuji has fully processed that someone is beside him, Todo is already in the middle of something, which is exactly the kind of presence the situation needs, rather than the kind that pauses to explain itself. What Todo says to Yuji before they fight together is short and operates at the frequency Yuji needs in the moment, rather than the frequency anyone else has been speaking on. He does not tell him that Nobara is going to be fine. He does not offer comfort through false certainty. He tells Yuji that they are the exception, that the people in this fight, the ones who went looking for curses without being told they were special or necessary or protected, are exceptions by definition, and exceptions do not stop. The words are not eloquent. They are not designed to be eloquent. They land because they come from someone who is already moving, who is inviting Yuji to move alongside him, rather than asking him to accept a comforting abstraction. Yuji gets up. The show does not make this easy or triumphant. He is not restored. He does not suddenly have back the things that have been taken from him tonight. The episode is careful to distinguish between someone who has found a reason to keep moving and someone who has recovered from what has been done to them. Yuji is the former. The recovery, to whatever extent it is ever possible, belongs to everything that comes after. What this stretch of the arc produces in Yuji Itadori is a version of himself that the earlier seasons did not contain. The person who gets up from the floor of Shibuya Station after Nobara falls is not the one who arrived at Tokyo Jujutsu High with his grandfather's dying wish as his compass and a fundamental belief that will and effort could bridge the gap between any outcome and any loss. That person has been dismantled, piece by Mahito and the Shibuya Incident across a single night. What comes back up off the floor has the same compass, but a different understanding of the terrain, and a relationship with loss that has been built from direct experience rather than inherited wisdom. The show does not frame this as growth in the conventional sense. It frames it as cost, which is the honest version. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section showed us the floor of what the Shibuya Incident was willing to put Yuji through, and the one person capable of reaching him when he was down there. Next is the fight those episodes were building toward across 2 full seasons, the final reckoning between Yuji and Mahito, and the cold clarity with which Yuji ends it. Section 9. Yuji and Todo versus Mahito. The end of something. There is a category of rivalry in long-running animated storytelling that goes beyond the mechanics of 2 characters fighting each other. The fights are important. The power levels and techniques and tactical decisions all matter in the moment. But what makes certain rivalries genuinely significant, what separates them from simply being recurring combat encounters, is when the relationship between the 2 parties is doing philosophical work that neither of them can do alone. when each of them represents something about the world, and the resolution of their conflict has to resolve something about what the world believes, not just who is left standing at the end. Yuji Itadori and Mahito have been in this kind of relationship since Season 1. From the moment Mahito entered the story, he has been positioned as Yuji's structural opposite in a way that goes deeper than hero and villain. Both of them act on instinct without counting the cost. Mahito kills without reasoning through why. Yuji saves without reasoning through why. Mahito identified this parallel in their very first encounter and has been pressing against it ever since, not because it gives him a tactical advantage, but because he is genuinely curious about what Yuji will do with the information. A cursed spirit born from human hatred is in some sense the most honest account of what people are capable of producing. And Mahito looks at Yuji and sees someone doing the exact opposite of what he does, through the exact same mechanism of pure instinct, and finds the comparison interesting. The philosophical argument has been building across 2 seasons. The final fight resolves it. Episodes 20 and 21 of Season 2 carry the full weight of everything that is accumulated between these two characters and put it into motion with Todo alongside Yuji, which changes the arithmetic of the fight decisively. Todo's Boogie Woogie technique, which swaps the positions of anything carrying cursed energy at the moment of a clap, creates a level of spatial unpredictability that Mahito cannot address through conventional adaptation. He is a creature who learns from exposure to techniques and builds responses over time. Boogie Woogie does not give him the time that process required. Every time he locates himself in space relative to his opponents, the space reorganizes. The fight operates at an extraordinary pace. Mahito burns through the souls he has accumulated through his experiment, using them to generate additional bodies and attacks that he deploys against Todo, while the real combat with Yuji continues. He splits, he recombines. He uses his domain expansion for exactly 0.2 seconds. A flash deployment designed to neutralize the thing that makes Todo most dangerous, which is his hands. The 0.2 second domain is not long enough to inflict the full overwhelming stimulus that a maintained domain expansion produces an opponent, but it is exactly long enough to create one specific outcome. Todo loses his left hand at the wrist. His Boogie Woogie is gone. The technique requires clapping, and clapping requires 2 functional hands, and Mahito understands this precisely enough to deploy his entire domain expansion for a fraction of a second specifically to remove one hand from one person. Todo stays in the fight. Without the technique, without the spatial unpredictability that has been the primary mechanism keeping Mahito from establishing control, he stays in the fight using only what his body can do. He is a grade 1 sorcerer of genuine capability even without his innate technique, and the show does not treat the loss of Boogie Woogie as the end of his usefulness. What he provides to Yuji in the final stretch is not technique. It is something less technical and more fundamental. It is the continued presence of someone who believes without qualification that Yuji has what the situation requires. Mahito eventually reaches his final transformation. The show refers to this as his instant spirit body of distorted killing, a form in which he has restructured his physical existence at the soul level so completely that he is no longer operating within the ordinary parameters of what his body can do. He is faster, he hits with more force, he adapts more rapidly, and crucially, he is no longer constrained by the need to manage the balance between his original and double forms, because at this level of transformation he has integrated everything into one coherent entity that operates without the split resource inefficiency of his earlier approach. Against this, Yuji lands Black Flash. The landing of the final Black Flash in this fight is the combat resolution, but the combat resolution is not the most important moment in the sequence. What matters is what happens immediately after Mahito breaks. After the final technique connects and Mahito is left on his hands and knees, the posture of someone who has just encountered the end of something, Yuji speaks. He does not rage. He does not deliver a triumphant proclamation. He does something the show has been building towards since the moment in Season 1 when Mahito first told him they were the same. He accepts it. He tells Mahito, "I'll accept it. I am you." He says that he wanted to reject it, that he wanted to find a way to argue that Mahito was wrong, that the parallel between killing without thinking and saving without thinking was a false one, that the instinct that drives him toward protecting people is categorically different from the instinct that drives Mahito toward destroying them. He wanted there to be a clean line between what he is and what Mahito is. He cannot draw the line anymore, not after everything the Shibuya Incident has produced. Not after watching people die and watching himself fail to prevent it. He is not the same as Mahito, but the mechanism is the same. The instinct operating without calculation, the action preceding the reasoning, the willingness to move without first determining whether moving is justified. He accepts this and then states what follows from accepting it. He will kill Mahito, and if Mahito returns as a different curse, with a different name and a different form, he will kill that too, and the one after that. Not because he has found a moral framework that makes the killing clean and justified. Not because he has resolved the philosophical problem Mahito raised, but because this is the role he occupies in the machinery of the world, a cog that will keep turning until it rusts away. And the meaning of that role, if it has meaning, belongs to a time after Yuji is gone, rather than to the moment he is operating inside. It is the most honest thing Yuji has said across 2 seasons of the show. Not the most hopeful, not the most heroic in any conventional sense. Simply the most honest, stripped of the comfort of knowing why the effort matters, and retaining only the knowledge that it continues regardless. He moves to finish it. Kenjaku appears. He walks into the scene with the specific unhurried quality of someone who has been watching and has decided the appropriate moment to intervene has arrived. He asks Mahito one question: should I save you? The framing is contemptuous in its gentleness. He is not offering rescue out of loyalty or affection. Mahito has served a function in the larger operation and no longer serves it cleanly. A Mahito who has been pushed to this point, who is visibly and fundamentally compromised, is a Mahito who requires resources to maintain and provides diminishing return. Mahito runs. He runs from Yuji, who has just made a statement of complete commitment to hunting him across every form he might take, and finds Kenjaku waiting in the direction he ran toward. He understands in the moment before it happens that he has been used, that the arrangement he was part of was always structured around someone else's longer plan, and that the plan no longer requires him. Kenjaku absorbs Mahito using the cursed spirit manipulation technique he inherited from Suguru Geto's body. The technique allows the storage and deployment of cursed spirits. Mahito absorbed ceases to exist as an independent entity. He is not dead in the clean sense that Yuji's corner and final technique would have produced. He is consumed, taken into the structure of someone else, and dissolved there. The end that Mahito receives is neither the defeat Yuji was delivering, nor something resembling survival. It is a disappearance that denies any of the weight that Yuji's resolution was building toward. Yuji watches this happen. The show does not give him a clean response to it, because there is no clean response available. He was about to finish something that has been unfinished since Junpei died on a stairwell in Season 1. He was about to close the account. Kenjaku steps in and removes the possibility, and what Yuji is left with is the statement he made while Mahito was still present to hear it, and whatever that statement means now that there is no one left in the space to answer it. What the sequence as a whole produces is not the satisfying resolution that the rivalry had been building towards since its inception. Yuji's acceptance of Mahito's argument about their parallel nature and the cold commitment that follows from that acceptance deserves a conclusion that matches it. The story denies that conclusion, which is its own kind of statement about the world the show is building. Clean endings require control of the circumstances, and Jujutsu Kaisen is consistently uninterested in giving its characters control of the circumstances. What does land, what remains after Kenjaku takes Mahito and the sequence closes, is the speech. The moment when Yuji Itadori stopped trying to be the person who could justify every act of violence through the clarity of his moral framework, and became instead the person who acknowledged the framework was insufficient and kept moving anyway. That is the most significant character development the series produces up to this point, and it happens in a few sentences delivered to a creature on its knees in an underground station in Shibuya. Everything about who Yuji Itadori is in the seasons that follow is organized around what he said in that moment. The acceptance was permanent. The commitment was permanent. The willingness to be a cog without a guarantee of meaning, turning until it rusts, is the version of Yuji that the rest of the story works with. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. This section brought us to the moment Yuji Itadori stopped needing the world to make sense before he could act in it. Next, we arrive at the single most acclaimed episode the show has ever produced: a woman walking through her family's estate with no hesitation and no intention of stopping until it is over. Section 10. Perfect preparation. Maki burns it all down. Every show that runs long enough eventually produces an episode that exists on a different level from everything around it. Not better in a comparative sense, as though the other episodes failed to reach the same height. Different in kind, as though the creative forces behind it found an additional gear that the format does not normally allow access to, and decided, for one specific stretch of 28 minutes, to use it completely. Season 3, Episode 4 of Jujutsu Kaisen, titled Perfect Preparation, is that episode for this series. It debuted on January 22, 2026, with a 9.8 rating on IMDb, making it the highest-rated episode in the show's history and placing it among the highest-rated single episodes of any anime production ever recorded on the platform. Reviews compared it to cinema rather than television. Multiple critics reached for Kurosawa for Tarantino, for language that does not normally get applied to a weekly animated series. None of this is hyperbole. The episode earns every word of it. To understand what the episode is and why it lands the way it does, you have to understand who Maki Zenin actually is and what the Zenin clan has been doing to her since before the show began. The Zenin clan is one of the 3 great Jujutsu families. Within the structure of Jujutsu society, these 3 clans occupy something like the institutional bedrock, old enough and powerful enough to have shaped the rules that everyone else operates on. The Zenin clan specifically is built on a single organizing principle. Cursed energy output determines worth. The strength of your technique, the volume of your cursed energy, the lineage from which your abilities derive, These are the measurements by which every member of the clan is assessed, ranked, and treated. This is not a subtext. The clan does not dress it in more palatable language. The hierarchy is explicit, the contempt for those at the bottom of it is open, and the people who are found wanting are not simply overlooked. They are treated as failures whose existence reflects poorly on the family, and they are managed accordingly. Maki Zenin was born with virtually no cursed energy. She and her twin sister Mai entered the world sharing a condition that the Jujutsu community understands as a specific phenomenon relating to twins. The cursed energy that should have been distributed between two separate people was effectively merged into one, meaning neither received a full share. In Mai's case, this produced a small but real amount. In Maki's case, it produced almost nothing. From the Zenin clan's perspective, this made her worthless by definition. Not wrong, not difficult, not a problem to be solved, worthless. The clan's father, Ogi Zenin, applied this assessment to both daughters throughout their childhoods with a consistency that the show depicts as methodical rather than passionate. He was not cruel in the explosive way of someone who loses control. He was cruel in the systematic way of someone who has decided the cruelty is justified. Maki left. She enrolled at Tokyo Jujutsu High not because the school was welcoming to someone with her background, but because leaving the clan and proving herself on different terms was the only version of her life that she could survive wanting. She entered the school with no cursed energy and built herself into a force that higher-ranked sorcerers took seriously through technique and physical development, and a work ethic built on the specific fuel of having something extremely large to prove to people who told her she was nothing. The heavenly restriction, which she shares with Toji in its fundamental mechanics, though not in its degree, is the trade her body made. Zero cursed energy in exchange for physical capabilities that operate beyond what normal human biology allows. In Maki's case, the restriction was incomplete while Mai was alive, because the twin bond meant that the small amount of cursed energy Mai carried anchored Maki to the ordinary physical range. With the bond intact, Maki was extraordinary but bounded. Without it, she becomes something else. The episode begins with returning to the Zenin estate to retrieve cursed tools for the coming culling game. The stated purpose is practical. She needs weapons. The weapons are stored on the clan's property. She has Megumi's authorization as the clan's technical heir to access them. On paper, this is an administrative visit. The clan has made other plans. In the aftermath of the Shibuya Incident, the Zenin leadership has used the chaos and the Jujutsu establishment's formal declaration that Yuji Itadori's allies are to be executed as cover to move against Maki, Mai, and Megumi simultaneously. The pretext is participation in Gojo's circle. The actual motivation is the threat these three represent to the clan's power structure, and Ogi's particular investment in removing his daughters before either of them can become anything more than what he decided they were. Maki arrives at the Cursed Tools warehouse and finds her father. He has Mai with him. Mai has been cut across the abdomen and is bleeding. The episode presents this without a build-up subsequence. There is no escalating tension, no moment of realization dawning slowly. She walks in and the situation is already what it is, which is Ogi Zenin, having decided that the appropriate response to his daughter's existence is to end it. He throws them into a room filled with cursed spirits of grade 2 level and below, sealed inside with no weapons, and leaves. His reasoning, which he states with the clinical detachment of someone explaining an administrative decision, is that if neither of them could defeat creatures of this grade, then they were never worth anything to begin with. He walks away. What happens in that room between Mai and Maki is the emotional center of the episode, and the show treats it with a care that the action sequences surrounding it serve rather than overshadow. Mai's cursed technique is called construction, an ability that allows her to materialize objects from nothing using her cursed energy. It is a technique she's never been able to develop beyond its most basic applications because the cursed energy required for it depletes her completely, and she does not have much to begin with. In this room dying, she uses all of it. She uses everything she has and everything she is. She materializes a single katana, a split-soul katana, the fullest expression of her technique at its absolute limit. The act requires burning through every unit of cursed energy remaining in her body. With that energy gone, the twin bond severs. Maki's heavenly restriction completes. The last constraint on her physical capacity, the connection to the sister whose minimal cursed energy had been the anchor keeping Maki within the range of ordinary possibility, is gone. Mai's final words to her sister, in the beach-like dream space where their consciousnesses meet in the moment of severance, are to destroy everything, not to grieve, not to be careful, destroy everything. This is not the instruction of someone giving into bitterness in their final moments. It is a gift. It is the clearest possible statement that the life Maki spent trying to prove herself to a system that had already decided against her deserved to end, and that the system itself is what should end instead. Maki wakes up. She is holding the katana. The cursed spirits in the room are already exorcised. She did this while the dream was happening. Her body, operating now without any cursed energy to slow it to human comparable ranges, handled the room on its own before she was fully conscious of having moved. Ogi notices. He senses a presence from the direction of the training room, and the show gives him a moment of genuine recognition. What he senses from Maki now is not his daughter, it is Toji, the outline of Toji Fushiguro, the man who left the Zenin clan decades before and proved through his entire career that the thing they despised most about him was actually the most dangerous thing they ever produced, emerges from Maki in the flash of Ogi's perception. He activates his strongest technique. He deploys everything he has. She cuts the top of his head off. What follows is the sequence that reviewers reached for cinema language to describe. Maki moves through the Zenin clan estate and its personnel with the specific quality of someone for whom obstacles at this level are no longer meaningful. The show gives the sequence the visual grammar of a 1 versus 100 fight, while being honest about how completely one-sided it is, because the 100 are not providing meaningful resistance. They are providing the texture of a system being dismantled, which is different from a fight. Screen doors go red. The corridors of the estate become a study in what happens when a person with zero cursed energy and body-level capabilities that exceed every conventional sorcerer alive moves through a space filled with people who built their entire understanding of combat around cursed energy hierarchy. The Kill Bill references are direct and acknowledged. The specific visual language of the Crazy 88 sequence from Quentin Tarantino's 2003 film is present in how the bodies fall, in the color choices, in the rhythm of Maki's movement through enclosed spaces. The homage works not because it borrows style, but because the thematic overlap is genuine. Both stories are about a woman dismantling a male power structure that betrayed her, and both use the vocabulary of extreme stylized violence to communicate something about the weight of what that structure took from her. The blood on the screen doors is not gratuitous, it is specific. Naoya is the final confrontation before the episode's conclusion. He is Maki's cousin and the person who most completely embodies what the Zenin clan's worldview produces in its most refined form. Fast, skilled, and entirely organized around the belief that strength is the only legitimate measure of a person, he has spent years dismissing Maki with the specific confidence of someone who cannot imagine being wrong about an assessment they made a long time ago. He is fast enough that even Maki's new capabilities require adjustment. For a moment, the show creates genuine uncertainty, which is not the uncertainty of wondering whether Maki will survive, but the more interesting uncertainty of watching her calibrate to something new in real time. She catches his pattern. After that, it is over. He ends on the floor with her knee on his skull, and then Maki's mother, who has been present throughout the episode in ways that communicated her own particular form of complicity in everything the clan did to her daughters, kills Naoya herself and dies alongside him. It is ugly and it is right, and the episode frames it without sentimentality because the situation does not earn sentimentality. Momo Nishimiya arrives after everything is finished. She comes looking for Mai. Maki leaves the body behind and continues. The promise was made to the living, and the living version of Mai knew exactly what the promise required, which was movement rather than remaining. The Zenin clan ends not with a political development or a narrative announcement, but with one person walking through rooms where the system used to operate, leaving behind the evidence of what the system cost, and continuing. The episode holds a 9.8 on IMDb, tied for second among all anime episodes ever rated on the platform. Its runtime of 28 minutes is longer than standard by the specific margin required to do the story without compressing its weight. The opening song is skipped. The production team at MAPPA made the decision to give the episode the room to be what it needed to be rather than fitting it to the format. This choice is itself a statement that some stories require more space than the container usually allows, and the right response is to expand the container. Jujutsu Kaisen, across 3 seasons and 51 episodes and the specific 10 this video has examined, has consistently made that choice. The story it is telling requires more than shonen action conventions allow for, so it operates beyond them. The characters it builds require more than supporting roles allow for, so it gives them their own episodes. The losses it asks the audience to absorb require more than brief acknowledgement allows for, so it holds the camera on faces in corridors and lets people imagine beaches they will never reach. Maki walking out of the Zenin estate is the clearest expression of what the whole series has been building toward, from the moment Yuji swallowed a finger in Sendai. The world contains systems that consume people. The people inside those systems can choose to become what the systems made them, or they can choose something else. The something else is never clean and never without cost, and sometimes arrives too late for the people who needed it most. But it arrives. That is what these episodes are about, taken together. Not power, not victory. The persistent, costly human decision to keep moving through a world that does not organize itself around your survival. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.